Our journey today begins during the celebrations of the Chinese New Year in Shanghai in 2026. Here, beneath a sky illuminated by thousands of glowing lanterns, the streets pulse with the sound of drums, cymbals, and firecrackers. Families crowd together, children perch upon their parents' shoulders, and through the sea of people a magnificent dragon twists and coils its way between the buildings. It rises, it dives, it seems almost alive. People reach out to touch it for luck. They cheer as it passes. Shopkeepers offer it fresh cabbages, believing the dragon's blessing brings prosperity in the year ahead. Children laugh as it dances past, and perhaps this all seems perfectly ordinary, but for many people today, it also seems remarkable. After all, when we hear the word dragon, we often imagine something very different. A winged monster, a beast that breathes fire, a creature that terrorizes villagers, guards treasure, or carries away princesses. And yet here, people celebrate them and welcome them into their streets. And China is far from alone in its fascination with dragons. Across history, people all over the world told tales about them. But they did not all imagine the same creature, nor did they tell the same story. And so, today's journey asks two simple questions. Who were the dragons? And what did people across history actually believe dragons were? And so to answer these questions, we must go back to a time when the world believed. Our search for answers keeps us in China, but moves us to 2,000 years ago when it was ruled by the Han Dynasty. At this time, dragons were believed to govern the very forces upon which life itself depended. As such, the Chinese called them the Dragon Kings. Not because they ruled kingdoms of people, but because they ruled the waters of the land. Great rivers, vast lakes, the seas beyond the horizon, and the rains that nourished the land. To a farming civilization, there could be few greater powers. Yet these dragons look nothing like the fire-breathing beasts that would later haunt the castles of medieval Europe. The Chinese dragon was long, serpentine, and graceful. It possessed the antlers of a stag, the scales of a carp, the claws of an eagle, the whiskers of a great catfish, and the flowing mane of a lion. Most remarkable of all, it had no wings, but could drift effortlessly through the heavens, coiling among the clouds, as though the sky itself were another ocean. When drought gripped the land, prayers and offerings were made to the Dragon Kings, and when the rains finally came, people believed the dragons had answered. After all, their voices were thunder, and their breath was the rain itself. The power of the Dragon Kings also meant they had to be constantly revered, for if they became angry, it was believed they could unleash floods, violent storms, and rivers burst in their banks. Over the centuries, they also became the supreme symbol of imperial authority. The Han emperors linked themselves with dragons as a sign of heaven's favour. By the Song dynasty, dragons adorned the imperial throne itself. And under the Qing emperors, the dragons had become the supreme emblem of the imperial house. Indeed, to wear the dragon in China was to proclaim that one's authority flowed from heaven itself. Japan, too, had its own dragon king. His name was Ryūjin. Like the Dragon Kings of China, Ryūjin ruled the waters, but his kingdom was the great Pacific Ocean that surrounded Japan. It was said that far beneath the waves, where sunlight could no longer touch, stood his magnificent palace. To sailors, Ryūjin was both protector and judge. A calm voyage or a violent storm might depend on whether the Dragon King smiled upon those who ventured into his kingdom. But beyond East Asia, dragons were not always revered. Across medieval Europe, they became creatures of fear, and as a result, the belief originated that some dragons had to die. In medieval Europe, dragons were believed to be something much darker. Here, dragons were said to haunt lonely mountains, dark forests, forgotten ruins, and deep caves where few dared to travel. Many possessed vast wings, great horned heads, armour like scales, claws capable of tearing through wood and stone. Most breathed fire, but others could expel poisonous vapours. And here we encounter one of the most enduring dragon traditions, the dragon's treasure hoard. and to stock it many dragons demanded tribute from terrified communities. Where dragons appeared, fear was believed to follow, and so, throughout the Middle Ages, another figure emerged to counter the Dragon Slayer. Perhaps none became more famous than St. George, whose legend had spread across much of Europe by the 13th century. According to medieval tradition, near the legendary city of Selene in Libya, a dragon dwelt beside the lake upon which the city depended. To keep the beast from attacking, tribute was left for it. At first, sheep were offered, but when there were insufficient flocks to satisfy the dragon, the people began drawing lots to see who amongst them would be sacrificed. Until one day, legend tells us, the king's own daughter was chosen. Dressed almost like a bride, she walked alone towards the dragon, believing she would never return. But then, George arrived. Making the sign of the cross, he lowered his lance and charged. The dragon was struck and terribly wounded, allowing George to draw his sword and end the terror that had haunted the city. Whether understood as history, miracle, or allegory, the story remains one of Christianity's most enduring symbols of courage overcoming evil. But George's dragon was not the only fearsome beast that history remembered. Several centuries earlier, another great dragon haunted the imagination of England. The legend of Beowulf tells of an ancient dragon who lay sleeping for centuries, curled around a forgotten treasure. Then, when a single golden cup was stolen, it awakened and was furious. Night after night, the dragon emerged from its lair. Its flames swept across Beowulf's kingdom. Homes burned, halls collapsed, people died. And though he was now an old king, Beowulf resolved to face the dragon himself. Deep within its rocky lair, the two met in a final battle. After a long struggle, Beowulf finally slew the dragon with his dagger. But to deliver the final blow, he had to come within reach of the dragon's jaws. The bite it gave him proved fatal. And so, in this legend, like St. George, Beowulf saved his people, but this time at the cost of his own life. Further north, among the Norse of Scandinavia, another tale about a dragon was told. His name was Fáfnir. But, unlike the other two dragons, Fáfnir had once been a man. Legend claimed that such was his greed for cursed treasure, he slowly became a monster. Immense, serpentine, suspicious of everyone. Like the dragon of Beowulf, he coiled himself around his hoard and waited for anyone foolish enough to approach. Then, a young hero named Sigurd arrived. Sigurd did not challenge the dragon openly. Instead, he used intellect and dug a pit beneath the path Fáfnir was said to travel. Hidden beneath the earth, he waited, and as the dragon passed overhead, Sigurd drove his sword upward into its unprotected belly. Mortally wounded, Fáfnir warned that his treasure was cursed. Yet Sigurd claimed it anyway, and this legend gave a powerful message about greed, as the curse would indeed bring about the death of Sigurd and the downfall of all others who sought to claim Fáfnir's treasure. And so, in medieval Europe, dragons were remembered as creatures so powerful that slaying them often came at a terrible cost. In South Asia, however, we encounter another dragon belief tied to the concept of a treasure hoard. For here, dragons were not remembered as deadly enemies, or as kings, but as guardians. In South Asia, dragons were protectors of great rivers, sacred lakes, hidden springs, and places of immense spiritual importance. Yet these guardian dragons had not always been dragons at all. For thousands of years, they had been ancient serpent spirits known as Nāgas. But as Buddhism spread across Asia during the first centuries AD, the dragon traditions of China gradually merged with the older serpent traditions of India. And over time, Nāgas came to be understood as dragons. Their image became one of the most enduring symbols of protection anywhere in Asia. Among the most beloved of all Nāga legends is that of Mucalinda. The story tells that as Buddha sat in meditation, a violent storm descended. Rain lashed the earth, floodwaters began to rise. Then, from beneath the waters emerged the great Nāga king, Mucalinda. His mighty coils lifted the Buddha above the flood. Then, unfolding his great hood, He sheltered the Buddha from the rain until the storm had finally passed. And so in this story, the legendary dragon was neither monster nor enemy, but a protective place of sanctuary. The same idea of the guardian dragon appears again in ancient Greece. In fact, the Greek word drakon is where our own word dragon ultimately comes from. And perhaps the most famous drakon to the Greeks was Ladon, the guardian of the garden of the Hesperides. Greek artists imagined him as an immense many-headed serpent, coiled endlessly around the tree that bore Hera's golden apples, fruit believed to grant immortality itself. Ladon was said to never sleep. His purpose was not to terrorize humanity, but to guard something mortals were never meant to possess. Only the great hero Hercules, during one of his famous labors, was finally said to have overcome him. And so, whether in southern Asia or ancient Greece, we again encounter dragons remembered not as destroyers, but as protectors. Yet our journey is about to take one final turn, and our search now leads us to perhaps the greatest dragons humanity ever imagined, creatures believed to have existed before the world itself. Our investigation now reaches humanity's oldest stories about dragons. In ancient Mesopotamia, more than 4,000 years ago, originated the story of Tiamat. She was believed to be not merely a monster, but the primeval sea itself. For the Babylonians believed that before the earth, the sky, and humanity, there existed only the endless waters of chaos, and Tiamat was their living soul. Then, according to the legend, the storm god Marduk challenged her. The winds howled, the heavens shook, the sea itself became a battlefield, and only when Marduk finally prevailed could order emerge from chaos. He divided Tiamat's immense body in two. From one half he fashioned the heavens, and from the other the earth, and so the Babylonians believed that the world itself had been born from the body of a dragon. Far to the north, the Norse imagined another immense dragon, not one at the beginning of the world, but one waiting patiently for its end. His name was Jörmungandr, the world serpent, so vast that his body encircled the oceans of Midgard, and did so by holding his own tail within his jaws. The Norse believed that when the final day arrived, Jörmungandr would release his tail, the seas would rise, the sky would split apart, and Ragnarok, the end of the world, would begin. Keeping with the Dragon Slayer tradition, they also believed Thor himself would meet the great serpent in battle. The Thunder God would strike Jörmungandr down, but, like Beowulf before him, victory would come at a terrible price. Legend told that after taking only 9 steps, Thor too would fall, overcome by the serpent's deadly venom. And so, as our search comes to an end, we find that, although we've encountered many different dragons in many different places, remarkable similarities begin to emerge. Today, many of us imagine dragons as creatures of fire, but throughout our journey, we have found them just as often connected to water, to mighty rivers, sacred lakes, storms and seas. Again and again, they retained the ancient form of a serpent. Many were guardians of treasure, of sacred places, or divine gifts. Some were believed to be the very forces upon which life itself depended, and those who stood against them were often called upon to show courage, wisdom, or sacrifice. Thousands of years after the earliest legends were first told, they remain one of humanity's oldest, most enduring, and most beloved of folklore traditions. And that is fitting. For once the world believed in dragons, and perhaps some still do, even if only for a whisper in